Welcome back to another episode of the Lendr podcast. I'm Bryce Matheson, and as always, this episode is brought to you by Lendr. Lendr is a loan management software tool designed to help you with every aspect of your business, from origination to servicing to payoff. Lendr helps you with document generation, helps you with collecting monthly payments, dispersing monthly payments to your investors, taking in new loan applications, giving your borrowers a portal that they can log into, giving your investors a portal that they can log into. Pretty much every aspect of everything that you do inside of your lending business can be done and facilitated through Lendr. You can check that out by going to joinlendr.com. That's Lendr, joinlendr.com. Now, on to the episode. All right, team, it is time for another Lendr update podcast, which are my favorite, and if you don't like it, that's okay because I'm still going to do it. So, we have been working hard. As always, we have got a big long list of brand new updates, which are really exciting for me to announce. So let's just go through these one by one. Okay, the first thing that we have changed is we have now added the ability to do DocuSigns directly from within the Documents portal. So I'm sure you're probably already aware, but there is a Documents button, and as you hover over that, there's a DocuSigns button. You click on DocuSign, and you go in there and you can drag and drop your documents. Then you can send a new document for DocuSign. You'd add all your signature fields and the date and the different places that you want to sign, but you have to go to Documents and then DocuSigns. Sometimes you're just inside of a loan file and you have a term sheet or maybe an ACH authorization or some other form that you want to have sent via DocuSign. It's kind of clunky because you have to download it and then go to DocuSign and then do all that. Whereas you can just be inside of the loan file now. You click on the Documents tab and there's a little DocuSign button on the far right of all the different documents. And you can just click on that and send it via DocuSign. So pretty minimal, but still just nice, nice to have. Okay, we have added a split payment feature, and the really the main reason behind this is our ACH processor has a max debit limit of $25,000. And so, for example, we had a lender on the platform who did a really big loan. It was like $2.5 million, and their monthly payment from the borrower was in excess of $30,000, I think. And so it would try to process, and then it would fail just because it exceeded the transaction limits. So we have now added a split button, and it's on the payments page right next to like the edit and delete button. You can now click on split, and you can split it into typically just 2 transactions is enough for most people, but you could do 3, 4, 5, 6 different splits if you want to. And this also comes into play for a couple different things. So let's say, for example, you did an interest reserve, and you've kind of chiseled away at this interest reserve, and now there's only $1,000 left in that interest reserve. What you can do is, let's say you have a $3,000 payment, you can split it into 2. So you can do a $2,000 payment and a $1,000 payment. You can mark the $1,000 payment as paid from the reserve, and you can collect the remaining $2,000 just as you would any other payment otherwise. So it's got some additional utility besides just like the ACH transaction limit, but it's now there and ready to use if you ever run into that sort of thing. This might be probably the biggest update out of all of them. We now have, and I'm, I think I say this all the time, but I'm a little bit embarrassed that some of these things have just taken so long. We're just busy working on other things. We now have an external loan application, which is humongous because we've had a lot of people request this. And the main reason behind this is we've noticed that there's been some conversion issues or a lot of drop off from borrowers who are trying to submit a loan application, but they don't want to go through the full process of setting up a portal and then submitting a loan application. And that was my fault. I just kind of naively assumed that would not be an issue, but it has been. So here's the previous process, and here's how it works now. So before, let's say you had a borrower come to you and say, hey, I would like to submit a loan application. Cool. Okay. So what you would do is you would send them an invite, and they would put in their name and their email, and then they would get an email that says, hey, here's your login and your temporary password. And you would go and log in, you'd use that temporary password. You would have to go through a couple steps like changing your password and putting in your, all your personal information. Then you have to put in your LLC information and your EIN and your past experience and things like that. And we started to realize that there are a lot of borrowers who would just drop off. They would just disappear because they're like, oh man, I don't even like it. It felt very like kind of almost scary to them. Not scary is not the right word, but they were like, committing to something up front when really what they were looking for is they're just window shopping. They're just like kicking the tires. They're trying to like get quotes from a couple different lenders. Am I going to move forward with you? I'm going to move forward with you. And this was a huge issue because it would just prevent these borrowers from ever even getting through the onboarding flow and then submitting a loan application at all. They would just disappear and drop off. It would never actually get submitted. So now everybody has a unique link, and we're finding that a lot of lenders will go onto their website and they'll create like an apply now button, and it'll just link over to that link that you would grab inside of Lendr in the pipeline view. There's a link that says, application link. And so you link over to that. Whenever someone goes to that, it opens up your loan application form as before. But now, because they're not logged in, they just have to put in their name and their email and their date of birth and their phone number and stuff like that. And then they just go in and submit a loan application like they would previously, assuming they had, gone through the whole onboarding process. So now you can put this on your website. They don't have to do anything. They can just submit a loan application right there from day one. And if they are already a borrower in your system, then it'll just add that loan application to their existing portal. If they are not already a borrower in your system, they will obviously submit the loan application. But once it's submitted, the system will also send them an email to get onboarded into their portal. And so now, even if there is some drop off, which still happens regardless with borrowers, even if there is some drop off or like they're not that serious or they don't really have the deal locked up or what other plethora of reasons that the deal doesn't go through, you still have their information. And if it is something that like there really is meat on the bones, you now at least have the property address and their name and their email and their phone number. So you can call them and you can kind of prod them and be like, hey, are you still doing this? Is this a thing? Or, whatever have you. So this is pretty transformational. And it's really stupid, admittedly, that we didn't have this before, but it's there now. And it's been making a massive difference as far as just like getting loans into the system, which is what everybody needs, right? So huge change. Really excited for that. On top of that, with the loan application, you can now customize it so that it matches your branding and colors. And so at the top of the external loan application, it'll have your logo. And then by default, it'll have the blue banner on top. It'll have a gray background with like a white form. But if you don't like that and you want to have a green banner and a white background or whatever, like you can just go in and change the colors. So very easy to do that. This one is fairly minimal, but still kind of good to know. So if you use our investor opportunities section, that manual override slider, again, this is kind of stupid, but the manual override slider allowed you to say like, okay, this is a $200,000 loan. We're looking for $150,000 in funding. And then you can blast it out to all of your investors. Previously, there was no way to like type in how much you wanted to fund. It was just a slider. And so you would drag and drop it. And it would sometimes you would drag that little slider and it would land on $150,437. And then you would move it just one tick over and it would be like $149,226. And so there was no way to get it exactly to like an even 150,000. So we just add a little input box where you can type in the number that you want. So again, admittedly stupid, but it was something we should have had before that I don't know why we didn't. So it's there. Okay, we have made some pretty big improvements to the user interface for bank accounts. So before there was like, let's say a borrower was going to go in and update their bank account and they had 3 bank accounts. So they had their personal bank account and then they had 2 LLCs. So they had 3 bank accounts total. There was just one screen and there was a little drop down and it would say, which bank account are you modifying? Are you modifying this for LLC 1, LLC 2, or for your personal name? And for whatever reason, borrowers seem to miss that drop down and they would just go right into adding their account and routing number, which is fine. But the account and routing number was not necessarily, you're not filling out the account and routing number for just all of your bank accounts. It's that one individual bank account. So it defaulted to personal bank. And they would put in their account and routing number and they would tell their lender, okay, I'm good to go. I've added my bank account. But what they really needed to do was select that drop down and say, pick this LLC and add the bank account to that LLC so that we can draft for that, the specific properties that are in that name. Again, it's just these kind of weird, random, crazy things that you don't even think about, or I didn't even realize would be issues with borrowers doing that. But you get enough like feedback from people over and over and over. They're like, okay, this is becoming a consistent issue, so we need to change it. So now we just improved that. And so now it's a table and it shows all of your different accounts and whether or not it has a bank account linked directly next to it. And so it's really intuitive. It's way easier and we haven't had any issues since. So anyway, improved bank accounts interface. This is kind of cool. So on your loan pipeline, on those cards that you can drag and drop through the different columns, there's a lot of information there. So it has the property address, it has the loan amount, it has the loan type. Is this a purchase or a refinance? It'll show the borrower's name, the co-borrower's name, any tags. It'll show any notes. Like there's a ton of different information on those cards. Like previously it was just set, and this is, this is what you get to see, and that's just how it is. We've now made it where you can choose each one of those individual items, and you can turn it on and off and toggle what you do or don't want to see. And we've also added a new one that shows a counter of the number of days that it's been in the pipeline. So say, for example, most deals typically close within 30 days or less, but if you add that counter, it'll show, hey, FYI, this deal has been in your pipeline for 39 days, and it'll be listed in red once it goes past 30. And so you can know, okay, something's going on. Either I need to hurry up and get this done, or we need to work with title to clear up some title issues or whatever. It's just a good indicator of how long has this deal been in my pipeline. And so it's now there and available if you'd like to use that. This is a minimal one. We added this for one of our users, and I don't know if many people use this, but it's still there. On the credit check screen, when you go to check a borrower's credit score, like front and center in big, gigantic text, it will show the borrower's credit score. Sometimes, though, we have other lenders who want to use like a different vendor to run their credit. So the credit poll that we have inside of Lendr, it's just a soft poll. Granted, it is free, and so a lot of people like that, but it is just a soft poll. And so it's not as detailed or maybe as accurate. It's still pretty close. But sometimes when people go and run credit with like a hard credit vendor, they'll notice that the number is off by like a couple points. So instead of having a 630, it's like a 637 or, whatever have you. So a user requested the ability to just be able to go in and override that credit score. And so now there's a little edit button, and you can go in and say, okay, instead of a 630, I know they have a 637, and I'm going to now upload my PDF with like my hard pull information and just leave it inside the borrower's profile. So everything is just there and stored whenever you need it. So minimal, but it is there if you want it. This is kind of a cool one that I think we should have had this before as well, but inside of a loan file, you've got all of your tabs up top, right? So if you're making changes to charges, you would click on charges. If you're making changes to payments, you would click on payments. There was a tab for notes. And so, if you want to leave comments or notes like, hey, we're waiting on this, or, I talked to the borrower and he said this, and you just add different notes and comments on the loan file, right? The problem though is like if you were in the documents tab and you're like, oh yeah, I want to add a note, you have to switch and go to the notes tab. And then if you're on charges and you're like, oh yeah, I need to do that, then you go back to the notes tab. And it's just, there's a lot of like tab switching, which is annoying. And so now we have made it so that the notes is visible on all of the different screens and all of the different tabs. And it's just a little like a bubble in the bottom right-hand corner that you click on, and this pane will slide out and you can add all of your comments. And then it's visible on all of the different screens. So you don't have to keep like switching back and forth, which is nice. Again, here's another a little one, but it's a million golden BPs, right? So we have added the last requested date on DocuSigns. So when you go to the DocuSign view, it shows a list of all of your completed and also pending DocuSigns that are like waiting to be signed. Sometimes you will send a contract or a document for signature, and a borrower just kind of sits on it and they don't do anything. Sometimes they'll open it and read it, but then they'll forget to go back and do it. And so in the past, and we've had this for a while, there's a remind button. So you can click that and it'll send another email reminder, just kind of nudging them to sign that. But we've now added, and this is a request by Robbie, so thank you, Robbie. He wanted to add a column for when was the last time that I sent a reminder. And so just that way you're not like reminding them too often. If you have a lot of documents and get like, I can't remember when I sent this last to him. So has it been 2 weeks or has it been 2 days? And so it just shows the last date that you sent a reminder now, and you can click on that and it'll update and refresh. So kind of nice. Okay, this is a really big one. We have made some changes to Dutch versus non-Dutch loans. If you didn't listen to our episode from last week, I encourage you to listen to that if you're not really sure what the difference between Dutch and non-Dutch is. But this one was pretty big. So let's say, for example, we had a $100,000 loan amount. We have a $20,000 construction holdback, and then there's $80,000 that gets dispersed to the borrower when the loan closes for the purchase of the property, right? Now, inside of Lendr, previously, whether you had Dutch or non-Dutch, we would require that you would allocate all $100,000 to the loan, whether it was Dutch or non-Dutch. And so let's say, for example, we had a non-Dutch loan. The payments and everything would still like reflect accurately with Dutch versus non-Dutch, but the system would still require where you would have to enter where is all $100,000 coming from, which is annoying because oftentimes we're starting to find that people will fund a loan, but then they will have different investors come in and fund the draw portion of it, which that's kind of like foreign to me. We don't really operate that way, but that's very common in the industry. Is we'll have one investor who will fund the purchase, and then we'll have another investor or two or three come in and fund the draws. And so the problem was people would say, well, I don't know who the investors are that are going to fund this, these draws. And so it's kind of clunky because you'd have to go in and they would make like fake investors, and they would call it fake investor or fake draw investor. And then they would add that to the loan to get up to their full 100,000. And then what they would do is when they had a real investor come in, they would swap it out with the fake investor. It's just kind of weird anyway. So the biggest issue that we had is not necessarily that, but on the dashboard, it wouldn't show an accurate breakdown of a true representation of where your capital was at. And so it would say, well, you're using 100,000, but you're not really using 100,000 because only 80 is deployed, and then you've got another 20 from your fake investor. So, long story long, what we have now is we have modified Dutch versus non-Dutch. So if it is a non-Dutch loan, initially you only have to put in the $80,000. And then when you go and fund those draws and it steps up that interest or that cost basis, it will now ask you, hey, which investors are you going to use to fund the remaining draws? And there's a new interface and UI that goes in and says, okay, I'm going to select, if it's a $10,000 draw, I'm going to take 5,000 from John and 5,000 from Steve, and then it'll allocate all that accordingly. So that's a pretty big change relative to what it was before. Granted, we don't see a lot of people using non-Dutch in the system, probably 10% of our users, but still, if you do a non-Dutch loan one-off, just something to be aware of. Okay, this was very subtle, very minimal, that probably most people will not even notice. But inside of a borrower's profile, there's the entities tab. And so you can click on entities, and oftentimes borrowers will have multiple LLCs. And so something that we had issues with in the past was you can go and you can archive or you can delete an entity. But let's say my entity's name is We Buy Houses LLC, and I used that entity on a loan file. When I deleted that entity, it didn't remove it from the loan file. And this is an issue because sometimes we would have borrowers who would accidentally create a duplicate entity, and they're basically the same. And so what would happen is a user would go in and they would delete one of the duplicates. But the problem is when they go to select the loan file, it would show two duplicates there. And so they actually removed the archived entity, but they were still pointing to the archived entity. So that may be confusing. I don't know if that makes sense. Again, it's not that big a deal, but now basically if you delete an entity, it will remove it from any loan files that it's attached to. So just FYI. We've got something that actually, you know what? I'm going to tease that one out. We have a new feature that's coming out that will make your life a lot easier, but I'm not going to announce it just yet because we're really close, but probably stay tuned for that on the next one. I'm going to skip over this one. Okay, these are some, in my opinion, these are some pretty big changes as well. We've made some changes to the document and the loan checklist. So inside of a loan file, you may or may not be aware, we have a loan checklist and we have a document checklist. And the loan checklist is really designed to be your kind of your checklist or your to-do list, really. It's a step-by-step, like, okay, make sure I review the title commitment and make sure I reach out to the attorney and I make sure that the legal and the parcel number match on the title commitment and my loan docs and all that kind of stuff, just your to-do list. And then your document checklist obviously is a list of all of the documents that you need to have inside of a loan file. Now, in the past, we've made it where you can have multiple loan checklists, but you could only have one document checklist. And now we've changed that where you can have multiple loan checklists and multiple document checklists. And the main reason for this is we started to find that people would do different types of loans, like a DSCR versus a fix and flip, needed different documents, frankly. And also if you have like a different lender, a broker that you're going to be brokering these DSCR loans off to, they may have their own set of requirements. So now you can have multiple. You can have unlimited document checklists, unlimited loan checklists, and you can specify too, I want you to use this document checklist if it is a purchase or a purchase and rehab or a ground up construction. And then you could say, I want you to use this document checklist if it's a DSCR or a cash out refi or, whatever. And on top of that, now you can also you can, rather than doing it by loan type, you can also do it by loan product. So let's say you have a ground up construction loan product and you have a fix and flip bridge loan product in the system. You can now choose which loan checklists or document checklist to use based off loan product if you want. It's either or. So you could say, I want it based off loan type, or I want it to be based off the loan product. So you get to choose, and you can mix and match, and it, gets kind of complicated, but there's a lot more customization there and capabilities there. One last thing with the document checklist is previously there was no way to remove an item from the document checklist without going and modifying the template, which was really annoying. So for example, let's say I have my templated list of documents on my checklist, and it says, I want my purchase agreement, my articles of organization, and an ACH authorization. The problem though is you may have a loan where okay, for whatever reason, we're not going to do monthly payments on this particular loan, so I don't need an ACH authorization because they're going to pay all of it on the back end. Or maybe it's transactional funding, and there's not even going to be any payments because it's only going to be used for 2 days, for a double close or whatever weird scenario, right? Before, you would have to go to the document template and remove the ACH authorization to remove that from the document checklist, which was really dumb. It shouldn't have been that way anyway. So now there's a little X next to every single item in the document checklist. And if it imports your document checklist and there's just one specific item like that ACH authorization that doesn't apply, cool, you just delete it and then just removes it for that particular loan file. So that's a pretty big change. We've needed that for quite some time, but it's now there. This is pretty minimal, but still kind of nice to have just for audit purposes. In the past, when you have generated a Notcha file, if you use Notchas, I personally do a combination of both Notcha and ACH, just depending on what I'm doing. When you've generated a Notcha, it would just download the Notcha file and that's it. It would kind of disappear. And so you would just take that Notcha file, upload it to your bank, and all the payments would process like you would expect. Now we have a historical log. So if you ever want to go back and you'd be like, okay, who did I actually send money to way back in June? And what was the dollar amount? And what were the credits and debits and the account numbers that I used and all that kind of stuff. So now if you go to reports, there's a new report for historical Notchas. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but you can click on that and you can see all of the Notcha files that you have ever generated. And you can click on the individual Notcha files and it will show a detailed view of all of the different individual transactions that are inside of that Notcha file. Just so if there's ever an issue, you can go back and kind of audit and figure out what went wrong. And you can also re-download an old Notcha file. So we store all those now. And so if you ever need to reprocess or rerun one, you can just click on that and see it all. So kind of nice. Not a huge thing. I don't think many people will notice, but it's now there if you need it. This is a very minimal one, but you can now favorite or star reports on the report screen. So we have a lot of reports, but sometimes people just use 2 to 3 of them. And so what we've added now is next to the name of every single report, there's now a star, and you can just click on that and we'll take that report and it will pin it to the very top of the list. And so you can favorite all of your lists, and then that way they're just front and center. So you don't have to kind of go through this big long list of reports. And granted, the longer that we're around, we're going to have more reports. And so that reports page will probably just get longer and longer and longer. And a lot of them may not apply to you. So just pin the ones that you want to use and you can find them a lot faster. So, okay, very last one, and this is pretty anticlimactic, but now there is a little button toggle that we added whenever you approve a draw request, and it's just an option that says, do I want to notify the borrower or not that I have approved their draw request? So it's enabled by default, but sometimes you're backdating a loan, and before there was no way to turn this on or off. And so say you are backdating a loan and you're doing all of these draw requests from 6 months ago, the borrower each time would just get an alert saying, hey, your draw request for $10,000 has been approved. And so borrowers would be confused and be like, wait, this loan already paid off. Why am I getting it's kind of weird. So anyway, now you can just uncheck that and it won't send them an email. So like I said, kind of anticlimactic, but it is what it is. So, okay. I didn't count what that actually came out to, but it looks like there's 20-ish new features. One thing that I kind of like is these are becoming more and more minute. They're not these huge, gigantic, crazy changes anymore that fundamentally change the way that you're doing things, which for me, building the Lendr platform, I really like because it makes me feel like okay, like we're getting there. Like we're kind of hitting our stride. And all of these like fire drills that we've had to do in the past, like, oh, wow, I did not even think about that scenario with this or this. Like a lot of those are starting to calm down, which I really like. We now have a use case for like almost every single outside of the box little use case. And it's really cool. Makes me excited. So as always, we're going to do another one of these probably in a month because things do change that rapidly. And we're always putting out lots and lots of new changes, which for me is really exciting. So stay tuned for that. And until next week, thanks for listening. See ya.